It is Thursday, March 26th, and today's Algebra 2 lesson is I can determine if a survey has a good sample by determining if it is random or has bias. So this lesson requires a lot of explaining, kind of interesting for our first online lesson. That's why I'm choosing to use Zoom to record this one as opposed to Smart Notebook. Most of these lessons I'm going to do on Smart Notebook. So we talked in class about what a survey is. A survey is basically when you're asking somebody something. And a huge component to a survey is choosing a good sample. Now, a sample, as you've learned, is part of the population. If I want to know how the entire school feels about soccer, I'm not going to ask every single person in the entire school because that would take me forever. And well, let's be honest, a lot of people don't really go to school. So that would not be really a good way to determine how the entire school feels about soccer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a sample of the population that represents the population. So there's a good sample and there's a bad sample. And to determine if a sample is good or bad, I need to determine if there's any bias. So here, let's have you take a look at me. So I'll give you an example of bias. If I want to see how the entire school feels about soccer, let's say that the sample that I choose, the group of students that I choose to represent the population is the soccer team. If I ask the soccer team how they feel about soccer, everyone's going to say, I like soccer. 100% of the students are going to say that. Does that represent the entire school? Does the entire school like soccer? Probably not. That's bias. It's asking a group of students who I already know are going to feel a certain way about soccer. It would also be biased for me to, let's say, have my sample be the drama club, because most students that are in drama probably aren't into sports. Those are both examples of bias. The opposite of bias is random. So a unbiased random sample would be asking every fifth person to walk in the door in the morning. There's no reason that every fifth person is going to necessarily feel a certain way about soccer. I could ask every 10th person going into gym class because everybody has gym class. Every member of the population has to have a chance of being chosen. So if my survey is how the entire school feels about soccer, I can't just ask the 9th grade English classes because that would represent how 9th graders feel about soccer, not the entire school. So my sample has to have every member of the population have a chance of being chosen. Another example of bias. Let's say I want to know how many hours students at Westbury High School spend doing their homework. A biased sample, a bad sample, would be to ask the AP Calc students. Because AP Calc students, if you're in an AP class, they're probably doing a lot more work than the average student. So that would be bias. It would also be bias asking students in ISS. Students in ISS in general probably spend less time doing their homework than the average student. A good, unbiased, random sample would be, again, asking every 10th person that walks in the building in the morning, asking every 5th English class how much time they spend doing homework. English would be okay because every student takes an English class. If I said asking every 5th student in a psychology class, that would be biased because not every student takes psychology. Another thing about a good sample is you want it to be relatively big. If I just ask 2 students how they feel on something, it's not going to give me accurate results. There's no specific number of students that you need for there to be in your sample, but you want it to be of a decent size. So at this point, let's just take a look one more time at what I displayed there as far as what the notes are for this lesson. And then we're going to go through some examples, which is in your packet. So again, I can determine if a survey has a good sample by determining if it is random or has bias. A survey is a type of observational study that gathers data by asking people a number of questions, and a good sample should be randomly randomly selected where every member of the population has a chance of being chosen. So again, this next worksheet, this is in your packet. It's also on Schlansky.com. It's a lot of places. I'll get it to you as many ways as I possibly can. So determining an unbiased random sample, like we said, a random sample is one that is selected in a way that gives every different possible sample an equal chance of being chosen. Every member of the population must have the opportunity to be chosen in the sample, and the sample should be large enough to represent a good portion of the population. So here's my situation. A survey team wants to determine what the favorite foods are of students in a high school. Determine whether the following would be unbiased random samples. Assume all students have a normal schedule. A normal schedule means, you know, they take all their regular classes. They don't have to worry about anything weird. So again, let's jot this down here. Whoops. So bias is bad. Random is good. Asking every fifth student entering the cafeteria. Is that random? Yes. So determine whether the following would be unbiased random samples. Yes. Asking all fifth period English 9 students. Well, does every member of the population have a chance of being chosen? No. This might be a good sample to determine how ninth graders feel about foods, but it doesn't represent the entire population. That's why it's bad. Asking 5 randomly selected students in every physical education class. Does every student take phys ed? Yes, every student takes phys ed. It's random, so yes, that is a good sample. Asking 20 randomly selected students in all study halls. Do all students take study hall? No. So for all the students who are like really smart and taking all these crazy classes that have a packed schedule, they're not a part of the population. That wouldn't be a good representation of the entire population. Asking students whose street address name starts with a vowel. Is that random? Do people whose address start with a vowel instead of a consonant necessarily feel a certain way about food? That is random. So yes, that would be a good sample. It's random. Everyone has a street address, so everyone has a chance of being chosen. Asking randomly selected students in the culinary club. Is every student in the culinary club? No, a lot of students don't have a chance of being chosen. In fact, probably students in the culinary club like all these weird fancy foods that I'd never even heard of. So no, that is not a good sample. Asking all students in a randomly selected English 9, English 10, English 11, and English 12 class. Does every member of the population have a chance of being chosen? Yes. Is it random? Yes. Asking every 5th student entering the building in the morning. Is it random? Yes. Does every student have a chance of being chosen? Yes. We're assuming every student comes to school, not like Westbury High School, haha. And finally, asking every 5th student at the varsity basketball game. Does every member of the population have a chance of being chosen? No, not everybody goes to the varsity basketball game. You're getting all the sports people, they're probably all like fries and nachos. So no, that is not a good sample. There's bias because you're talking to sports fans, not the entire population. All right, let's see what's next. I'm still getting used to this whole platform, so bear with me. Sample statistics and population characteristics. We refer to summary measures calculated using data from an entire population as population characteristics. We refer to summary measures calculated using data from a sample as sample statistics. We generalize from a sample to the corresponding population. So this is important, what it's saying here. We generalize We generalize from a sample to the corresponding population. So if I do a survey and I find that 20% of my sample likes iced tea, then I can conclude that approximately 20% of my population will. That's why we do a survey. A survey gives us an idea of how the population is going to feel about something. It's not going to be exact, but it's going to be approximate. So if I do a survey and I find that 17% of my sample goes to tutorial, then I can conclude that approximately 17% of the entire school goes to tutorial. That's the point of doing a survey. And again, it's another reason why it's so important to choose a good sample. If my sample was students at tutorial, then I would say 100% of my sample goes to tutorial, and I would be able to conclude that 100% of the total students go to tutorial. That's not the case. That's why bias is bad. I need to choose a random sample, and based on my random sample, it will give me a good approximation of my entire population. So let's see what we got here. For the following situations, state whether they are examples of sample statistics or population characteristics. Write an accompanying sentence regarding the population. See if I can do this with by typing. That might make things a little bit easier for us. A box of Titleist golf balls were tested, and it was found that 8% of them had imperfections. The population, what is this asking us to do here? So I guess I'm telling you the answers here. I haven't looked at this worksheet. So the population is the Titleist golf balls, and the sample is the 8% of them that were tested. For B, Yellowstone National Park's animals are comprised 62% of bison. The population is all the animals in Yellowstone Park, and the sample is the bison. In a survey, it was found that 43% of voters voted for candidate A. The population would be all the voters. The sample would be the 43% who voted for candidate A. 88% of the more than 300 million automobile tires discarded per year are recycled or used for fuel. The population is the 300 million automobile tires. The sample is the 88% that were discarded or recycled. 64% of respondents in a recent poll indicated that residents of Juarez favored building a proposed highway in their town. So the population is the residents of Juarez. The sample is the 64% who indicated that they favored the highway. We did a lot of talking. Now we're going to take a look at some examples. Which statement about statistical studies is true? A survey of all English classes in a high school would be a good sample to determine the number of hours students throughout the school spend studying. So my sample is, let me see if I can blow this up a little bit. Oops. Yeah, that's better. My sample is English classes in all English classes in a high school. Is that random? Yes. Does every member have a chance of being chosen? Yes. I think that's good. Choice 2, a survey of all ninth graders in a high school would be a good sample to determine the number of student parking spaces needed at that high school. My sample is all ninth graders. Does that represent the entire population? No, that only represents ninth graders. There's also 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. Also, are ninth graders using parking spaces? No, that's a horrible sample. It's a horrible sample because it doesn't include the entire population and because ninth graders aren't even involved with the parking spaces. A survey of all students in one lunch period in a high school would be a good sample to determine the amount of hours adults spend on social media websites. So my population is adults. I'm asking high school students. That sample does not even represent the population. Therefore, that is a bad sample. That sample might represent how many hours students spend on social media websites, but you can't ask students about how many hours adults spend. That doesn't make any sense. A survey of all calculus students in a high school would be a good sample to determine the number of students throughout the school who don't like math. Is calculus students a good sample for the entire school? No. Calculus students, for the most part, they made it that far, they probably all like math. Not every student takes calculus, therefore it's a bad sample. Which statement is true? Choice one. Hope at this point things are starting to stick. We're going to go through one or two more together, and then after that, I'm going to let you do them on your own. Number 4. Which survey is least likely to contain bias? So the wording can throw people off. It says least likely to contain bias. Bias is bad. So is it asking for the best answer or the worst answer? Read it. Least likely to contain bias. It's asking for the best answer. So let's see what's good, let's see what's bad. Surveying a sample of people leaving a movie theater to determine which flavor of ice cream is the most popular. Is it random? Is going to a movie theater going to lead people to liking specific types of ice cream? No. It's random. Does it include every member of the population? Does every member of the population go to a movie theater? Not really, but I'm going to give it a check for now because it's definitely random. Surveying the members of a football team to determine the most watched TV sport. Well, if you're surveying members of a football team, they're all going to say they like football. That's bias. It's not random. If I'm asking people who play football what sport they like to watch, they're probably going to say football. Surveying a sample of people leaving a library to determine the average number of books a person reads in a year. Is there bias there? Yes, people in a library read a lot of books. So if you're asking people at the library, they're all going to say they read a lot of books, where people like me don't read books at all. That is definitely bias. People in a library read more than the average person. Surveying a sample of people leaving a gym to determine the average number of hours a person exercises each week. Is there bias there? Yes. If you're asking people at the gym, they probably work out a lot. It's not random. If you asked every person at the movie theater how much they worked out, that would be more random. Choice one is your answer, because asking people at the movies, there's no reason to believe that every person at the movies is going to like chocolate. But there is reason to believe that every member on the football team watches football. There is reason to believe that every person at the library reads a lot of books. There is reason to believe that people leaving a gym exercise more. That's bias. I'm going to give you a moment right now to try number 5 on your own. I'll go over it in about a minute and a half. And then after that, you're going to have the rest to practice for classwork and homework. Okay. A survey is to be conducted in a small upstate village to determine whether or not local residents should fund construction of a skateboard park by raising taxes. Which segment of the population would provide the most unbiased responses? It wants unbiased. So does it want good or bad? It wants good. So we're talking about funding a skateboard park, a club of local skateboard enthusiasts. Is there bias there? Yes. If I'm asking people who like to skateboard if they want a skateboard park, they're going to say yes. Senior citizens living on fixed incomes. Is there bias there? Yes, that is a bad sample. They're going to say no, they don't want to raise their taxes. They're not going to use a skateboard park. You don't see a lot of 85-year-olds on the half pipe. They're going to say no, that's bias. A group opposed to any tax increase. That's biased. Again, they're going to say no, no matter what. Every 10th person 18 years of age or older walking down Main Street. Is there bias there? No, it's random. Just because someone's walking down Main Street doesn't mean they necessarily feel a certain way. Every person in that community is allowed to walk down that street, so every member has a chance of being chosen. Which one is unbiased? Which one is good? Choice 4. So to sum this up, a good sample should be randomly selected, where every member of the population has a chance of being chosen. Bias is bad. Bias is where I'm asking the soccer team how they feel about soccer. They're going to say they like it. It's not random. It's not going to represent the entire population. The reason we do a survey, if I find that 40% of students like tacos, then I can conclude that approximately 40% of the entire school will like tacos. However, if I don't choose a random sample, if I choose students who are at Taco Bell, I'm going to get 100% of my samples going to like tacos. That does not represent the population. That's why it's so important that we choose a good sample. So for classwork/homework, you have the rest of this sheet. I'm going to update my website. I'm going to give you the keys at this point because I'm not going to be checking. It's just not going to happen at this point. I'm not going to be checking daily homework. I am going to be giving you quizzes each day on this. So there will be a quiz on this that will be posted shortly. And in order to do well on the quiz, you need to do the work and practice. We talked about self-responsibility. You need to have the self-responsibility at this point if we're learning remotely. There's really no way around it. So your classwork/homework to finish this worksheet. Again, you have the hard copy. The electronic version it'll be a lot of places. I think the website, Schlansky.com, is going to be the best place to access all this stuff. And that's our first lesson. Stay tuned tomorrow for controlled experiments. Should be a blast. See if I can figure out how to turn this thing off and enjoy.